So, when you guys think of the ideal aquarium, what comes to mind?
Dryrock, designer clownfish, rainbow
40-gallon pond
coral,
snail breeder,
10-gallon planted beta with 6 filters,
20
Using-
gallons for each assassin snail,
RODI guppy breeder tank, a
That
koi
is
pond,
cringe.
wall-stacked brackish cold water marine tank.
a planted sunlit macroalgae Blackwater refugium. Oh, wait, no, that's actually kind of
Well,
cool.
that actually sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, only if I had one of those. That'd be so neat.
Oh, that would be pretty cool, fuck. You know,
Green water invasive fish taupe.
60-gallon filterless lamprey cube.
Algae jar on my windowsill full of leeches. Oh wait, I actually have that.
Piss.
One Anubias per 5 gallons.
One moss ball for every 5 gallons.
Those are all cool ideas, guys, but personally, I like me a bioactive tank. Let's talk about ecosystems.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Salt water.
I think we have squeezed the sponge filter dry when it comes to talking about the ecosystems in saltwater, but we're still going to talk about them.
That was a good one.
Yeah, thanks.
Actually, hang on. You're off to a good start, but and I'm gonna let you finish. But I just want to say, fuck Dryrock. If you use Dryrock in your saltwater aquarium, I hope it fucking crashes. I hope the glass explodes and floods your fucking 1-bedroom apartment because that's all you can afford. And you don't get your security deposit, and then your dog drowns.
Baby,
I-
what
If you use some
Continue.
live rock and some dry rock to save money.
No, then I hope your tank only half explodes.
Grath says Dryrock is better. Who wants hitchhikers?
That's not how that works.
Hitchhikers are wait, no. All right, this podcast is gonna be a
Shut up,
2-hour
Tim.
podcast about me talking about
No,
why
Grath,
why
what have you
Dryrock
done?
sucks.
Oh, they did it. They got fucked around. I literally, I'm setting up a 20-gallon tank. I'm going to do 20 pounds of live rock just so the funk doesn't bitch at me every day. That's it.
Literally, the number one reason you don't use Dryrock is because I will fucking make fun of you for the rest of your days in this hobby if you use Dryrock, and I know it.
Can I use live rock in my Bettis tank?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you should only use live rock for freshwater tanks. So we'll talk about that too.
I just want to throw this in here really quickly. Baby bratfish just grabbed a pond snail and bit it so hard it like squirted everywhere. That was pretty cool. Good job, baby bratfish.
Whoa!
This
Spiritual,
podcast needs to
spiritual.
start again.
Did you just say you had a pond snail in your tank?
Yeah.
Aren't those invasive? Aren't those bad?
Yeah. Well, you see, Funk. For me, a tank is about an aquarium is not a sterile environment with a single PetSmart rescue betta and some plastic kabamba. For me, it's an actual ecosystem with all sorts of organisms in it, and that's fish. It can be any microfauna, snails especially, and that's just how I like my aquariums. And I think that's how we if we're we're trying to recreate an environment for these creatures, I think we should try our best to make it as natural as possible. So that's how I like to do it.
But snails are bad. If you Google "are snails bad," they say they're bad. Why would you want pound
Googling
snails
this
in your
now.
aquarium?
Funk, I googled are snails bad? The first thing that came up is snails don't do a lot of damage at ground level.
Is that land snails or water snails?
Yeah, it was a difference.
Oh no, it's land snail. I just googled are snails bad.
Okay, fine. Excuse
Wait.
me.
Funk, I don't put terrestrial snails in my tank.
I
Okay.
don't advise you do that.
Funk, I changed it up. I just typed is snail bad and it says yes. Big letters.
No.
There we go.
So guys,
There we
as
go.
we can see, snails are bad. Aquatic ecosystems as a whole are terrible. Just keep a rainbow gravel tank with a single Jack Dempsey.
Yes, that is the aquarium of a patrician.
So our podcast today is going to be talking a little bit about ecosystems, because if you understand what kind of the point of an aquarium is to replicate these aquatic environments, it doesn't make sense to just have your big fucking fish in with sand, water, and some PetSmart decorations. We're making ecosystems here, and we thought we would talk about that. It sounds like a school presentation.
I know, right?
I should have wrote an intro here, so
I know. I'm having those flashbacks of like 8th grade where you had to go up and present in front of the
Yeah.
class and you're all
You have,
nervous,
you
but
have the
you weren't
fucking
prepared.
This,
Like a
you have the
nightmare.
fucking like cardboard board with all of your pictures and everything on it.
this reminded me of a project we went on a. This is actually kind of related, believe it or not. We went on a little school trip and we had to do the science like presentation, and it was like over the course of 3 days we worked on it. We were over at Victoria in Canada, and we like hiked up to an estuary and like we were collecting like water samples, and then we gave this like shitty video presentation. And this reminded me a lot of that.
That's a really good story.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. I caught a scud. Of course, the scud died because we didn't have time to hike back up. So, rest in peace, scud.
Hey guys, I actually have a question. Just going back to this whole school presentation thing, have you guys ever or remember like being in 8th grade and you wore gym shorts and you had to give a presentation and you accidentally got a boner and you had to like try to hide it as you gave a presentation?
Are you implying that you're hiding a boner as you do the TCT podcast?
Unironically,
I'm
Funk.
not hiding it. But
Unironically, Funk. Never happened to me.
Yeah,
I even had
either.
problems getting an erection in 8th grade.
Oh
man, that's sad. So anyway, ecosystems and aquariums. I think spiritual probably is the best at this. I mean, I keep saltwater, and I'm a big advocate of nasty, stinky, mature live rock collected from the ocean. But I feel like I'm being a dead fucking horse because about 75% of all of our TCT podcasts just turn to me ranting about the advocacy of real live rock and not dry rock. So I think we need some other content. So spiritual. Walk us through your tanks. Your tanks are very unique. Like, for someone that's been a hobby for what, like 3-4 years?
It's been about 3 years. I mean, I did as a kid, but that doesn't count because I had a single black neon and a freshwater tank. So
your tanks have this certain, and I'm sure they'll be flowing around the background. They have this certain dirtiness to them. They look like a creek, like a pond. I mean, can you walk us through just kind of your process from conception and setting it up and cycling it and how you source stuff? Because you're actually someone, I've been doing this for 15-16 years, and you actually gave me some tidbits and pointers to get my tanks nice and ripe and bioactive. So start from the beginning, start from going out and buying a glass box and walking us through the whole process.
Well, if I'm going to talk about actually from the start of my hobby, I did not start with this crazy bioactive actual simulation of an ecosystem level of this hobby. When I started, I got out and bought a tank, I chucked some gravel in, I had some plastic plants, and just sort of over time it evolved into getting live plants and trying to create a more natural environment. And I think when it reached a point where I'd really say it got natural, it got to a point where it was honestly a bioactive system, is when I got floating plants. And I will always advocate for floating plants in freshwater aquariums. I think they're awesome. And one of the reasons for that was very simply, I went out to a garden store, not a fish store. I didn't get tissue cultured Sylvinia. I went out to the garden store, went to the pond section, and I just grabbed, it was just a little tub of duckweed. And I look at it, there's a bunch of pond snails crawling around, and at first I was like, I should take these out, but I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna let them, I'm gonna let them thrive and see what happens. And I pour this was dumped into a little 2.5 bowl that now houses a Dario. And over the next few days, I'm seeing there's all these ostracods and these copepods swimming around in this bowl, and I'm like, this is really cool. This is actually a little ecosphere. We've seen those videos by Life in Jars where they'll go to a creek and collect a bunch of critters and have them swimming around. It was just like that. And later what I did is I got a Dario, which is just a little nanofish, and I added him to there, and he lives completely off of I've fed him a few times with blackworms and stuff that I've also found, but he just thrives off of this basically an entirely self-sustaining ecosystem because there's only one fish, so it's not like he's gonna consume all the Daphnia or all the copepods within an hour, because they've got a ton of hiding places because of all the plant coverage, and the density of the floaters allows them to actually house themselves in there quite well. So they just when one decides to stray away, Dario eats it up, and it's just quite the self-sustaining ecosystem. And ever since I saw that, I've been trying to replicate that in my other tanks, and it's been quite the adventure.
Have you ever gone something not good from doing this?
Okay, so I have gotten a few things that people would consider pests. I would say, I mean, some people consider pond snails pests. I don't agree with that. I think if you don't overfeed your tanks, you're not going to find much of an issue with pond snails. Like my 10-gallon, I'd say I probably, I feed that one daily, which is, I normally feed my tanks every other day, but I feed that one daily, and there's quite a few in there, but they don't bother me personally. I think they add to the ecosystem. Some things I'd say people would consider more like pests are, like, for example, Polinarian, because people, I don't know, they attack shrimp or something, but personally, I've never seen them stick around very long. I do have Hydra on my glass, and that's not ideal. It's kind of like, I didn't have it at first, so it was never an issue, and then I tried to be more bioactive, but the issue is Hydra eat small crustaceans like copepods, so it's a little, it's a bit of an issue there, but personally, I've had Hydra in that little bowl, and I have not seen a real, I've seen the population of copepods and other microfauna diminish a bit, but it hasn't been too big of an issue. But I mean, that is something to keep in mind. But generally, I wouldn't say, I have not encountered any, there's not been a time where I've chucked some wild plants in my tank and there's been some mega disease that's wiped out my entire tank. So far I've not encountered a major issue from it. I mean, if I do, I'm not gonna hide it and say, I'll mention that it's definitely a thing that could happen. I'm sure there's the potential for something like that, but so far, no, I really haven't encountered anything negative.
All right, cool. So I know you keep small tanks. You have what, a 10-gallon, a 9-gallon, and a bowl?
I have a 10-gallon, I have a 9-gallon, I have a little 2.5 bowl. My largest tank is a 20 tall, which is it's a terrible dimensions.
That's the shipwreck tank, right?
It's a shipwreck tank. It's got this little shipwreck in the middle, and you know what? 20 talls suck, but I can't help but love that tank. It's just full of sticks I've collected from the forest, and I just think it's quite the nice environment, even if the light barely reaches the bottom and all the crypts have 2 leaves.
Wait, so you go to the wild and you go get sticks from the forest and put them in your aquarium?
Yes.
Bro, you're a madman. That's crazy. They say you have to boil them. Do you boil them first?
So sometimes, here's my process. Sometimes I will get sticks sometimes I'll collect driftwood from rivers and creeks because, well, it's waterlogged, so it's usually, well, actually it doesn't end up being waterlogged after the process, so it's a little counterintuitive, but usually you'll find some cool looking wood, just sitting on the bottom of a creek. And honestly, what I usually do is I just leave it on my deck for a few days because it's so damn hot that it kind of just bakes it, and then I chuck it in the tank, and there's usually not an issue. One thing though is I wouldn't call this an issue, but it's something to keep in mind is sticks that aren't sticks that I just find in the forest. They usually have bark still on them, and that's gonna slowly kind of rot and peel off into the tank. But honestly, all that seems to do is float to the bottom and just looks like some weird botanicals and add a bit of tannins. So I'm not really too bothered by that. It doesn't really.
Hey, spiritual.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a bag of botanicals and a bag of oak leaves?
Is this a joke? I'm waiting for
about $200.
I can see why people pay for botanicals because objectively speaking, they're gonna look more tropical. I think Fun Times made that sunlit tank and it was beautiful, but his leaves it's very clear that his leaves are out of his backyard. And I've used maple leaves in my Blackwater before, and they definitely look out of place. I still think they look quite nice, but I can understand why people would want to purchase botanicals. But for me personally, I I'll go out in the yard even, and I'll just grab some leaves, and some people boil them. I personally just rinse them off, and a bunch of centipedes crawl out. It's really gross, but and then I feed the centipedes to my fish.
Maple leaves. That's the Canada taupe, right?
Yeah, that's the Canada taupe. They actually look quite nice in there. It looks like well. You shouldn't expect to see neon tetras with maple leaves, but it looks kind of nice.
Maple and oak leaves look fucking amazing.
I love them both.
They're beautiful leaves.
I'll speak in defense of buying leaves because I've spent, oh my god, hundreds of dollars.
I've bought several packs of leaves.
Yeah, from Tannin. Shout out to Tannin Aquatics, fucking amazing vendor. I do it for 2 reasons. So the first and main reason is I live in Southern California. I live in a desert. There are really not many leaves to collect. Most of the trees around my house are eucalyptus leaves, which are poisonous. Or I guess I haven't tried it, but a lot of people say they are poisonous. And that's a problem. And that's kind of my issue is there's nothing really around. And the other reason I like tannin is just there is a lot of diversity in the leaves they get, especially some of the funky seed pods they get. They're just cool
Those
to
are
have.
cool.
And it's not like it breaks the bank. I mean, I probably do an order of tannin every 3 or 4 months. My water probably is pretty acidic. I don't know. My water coming from the taps is liquid concrete. I do all my water changes with it. Leaves degrade after about 3 or 4 months. It just looks like a pile of goo, and I add more. But I like the pods, and it's not super expensive to just get some funky looking leaves. Like right now, I'm using loquat leaves that are pretty cool. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah,
This is a very
you say your piece.
I just want to hit on something one of our viewers just said in our live chat. Shout out to the Community Tech Discord if you want to come and listen to live podcasts. You see how I work that in, Spiritual? I'm a fucking wizard at this. Grath in Community Tech Discord says, I don't like ecosystem tanks because I am one of the people who likes to control every aspect of my tank, hence using Dryrock. Now, before we get Funk to drive to this poor man's house and kill him and his dog, let's talk about controlling every aspect of a tank and how that conflicts with ecosystems. Because for me, if you can control every aspect of a tank, that tank loses its ability to surprise you, and it kind of completely takes the fun out of it.
Yeah, you spoke about that before because one of my favorite, I'll just quickly here, is that one of my favorite things is like noticing new things in my tanks. Like when I look at it, I'm like, holy cow, there's some like limpet snails on the glass. That's really cool. You know what I mean? Even if it's like the smallest thing, just seeing a little bit of growth and development in this ecosystem you've created is really cool. You know what I mean? Like you see, or like I don't know, like I'm trying to think of other things. One time I saw like a aquatic bug that I didn't even put in there, and it was just like, I guess I put it in there, but not intentionally. It's just, when you're controlling every aspect of your tanks, they lose the ability to surprise you, and they lose that aspect of being an actual ecosystem. You know what I mean? For me, aquarium keeping is not... It's playing God, but not in the sense that... This is going to get really stupid, like, philosophy here, but, like... aquarium keeping for me is like, we don't know if God is real, right? There shouldn't be a super amount of influence. No, just listen though. There shouldn't be like that super amount of influence on the tank. Whereas these like high-tech, control every aspect aquascape tanks remind me if like God's hand just came from the sky and like moved trees around because he wasn't happy with the landscape.
Hey, Spiritual.
Yeah?
Where do you get your DMT from?
I just drink tank water.
I think
this whole podcast, Spiritual's just been watching Tool music videos.
I was listening to a lot of Tool today.
I think Oscar hit the nail on the head. The whole appeal to aquariums to me is to introducing animals to you go to a tide pool, and you don't go to a tide pool to look at a bunch of sterile rocks and water crashing on them. You look to see how these animals have adapted and survived, and how they grow over each other, and how they live with each other in this harmony and this symbiosis. And I agree. There's you want to have control over your tanks. Like for me, like one of the biggest appeals about saltwater aquariums, yes, is just like we talked about the biodiversity, the hitchhikers. I can talk about it all day, but one of the things I love about saltwater tanks is the control you can have over them in terms of filtration. My filter on my saltwater tank is very intense. It's very sophisticated. I manage my water in a lot of different ways. Like people always think I'm this cavalier guy, like I don't give a fuck, I don't change water, yada yada yada. But I mean, I spend hours plumbing tanks, doing them in such a intricate way that I can hook up and change water and break down the tank and move it in hours. And same thing with my freshwater tank. My freshwater tank is a 40-gallon Blackwater tank. It's full of botanicals. It has really cool fish. It has a fucking turtle, which sucks, but that's a different podcast for a different day. But the filter, I could unhook it and hook it up to probably a 300-gallon well-stocked tank, and it would probably run it. So I like to have control over managing this water chemistry. All my tanks are horrendously overstocked. All my tanks are incredibly overfed, and I like to have control over it that way. But it gives me that wiggle room to just slam it with bioloads, slam it with animals, add stuff, delete stuff, do all this other, all these crazy things. So, I mean, that's kind of my control over it. But, this whole idea that, you have to be the master of every little speck that goes in your tank, that's just like OCD. That's not fun, man. Like, if you're tripping over like one Aptasia coming in on a frag plug, like, come on, man. Like, that's not a tank. That's a fucking sterile box with a bunch of little rainbow dots on it. That's not cool. That's not what this hobby's about.
But I wanted to speak really quickly on what you guys both said. Is that for me, and I'm sure this applies to you guys too, is that an aquarium for me is not. And some people, they want to handle this differently, and that's fine. But for me, an aquarium is not something I want to be giving every second of every minute of every day of my attention to. That made no sense, but whatever. I don't want to be like freaking out about, geez, what's my pH? Oh, geez, what's going on in here? Why is there a snail there? Oh no, there's algae growing on my Monte Carlo carpet. I just like to sit back, relax, enjoy my tank. If an issue shows up, deal with it, do a water change when it's needed, add some plants when it's needed, scoop out a few pond snails when I think there's too many. I don't want it to be something that's stressing me out. My aquariums rarely stress me out unless a bunch of fish are dying. It's oh geez, what did I do? But I think generally speaking, if your aquarium is providing you more stress than it's providing you relaxation, you're not doing it right.
Yeah, and I think that's something we chimed into on this podcast too, is you own the tank. You don't want the tank to own you.
Yeah,
you want to be able to have life, enjoy yourself. And the other thing too is, for me, you want to have to you want to spend time in your tanks.
Yes.
I spend a lot of time on my aquariums. I do. It's gonna happen a lot less because I'm having a kid, but I enjoy trying new things, tweaking things, turning the flow up to see if I can get a little more turnover and see if I see some better results in the growth of my algae. I tinker with it, and it's an enjoyable tinker. I'm not running around course correcting it, tripping it because I have a little bit of cyanobacterial algae on my sand. I enjoy just tinkering with it because I see the aquarium hobby is it's like having a car. You're always trying to tune it up, trying to make it run better. And I also subscribe to the idea, just like Spiritual said, it's my life's motto. I probably said in the podcast before, but the less fucks you give, the more fucks you get. And doing this hobby for so long, trying so many crazy filter methodologies, trying so much snake oil and wacky things, I found that all that kind of stuff has never led to the results I wanted. And when I stepped back and I filtered well and kind of set it up the way I want to set up and use things like macroalgae refugiums, use things like bioactive botanical tanks, the results were always so much better and so much less work.
Now, our man Grath chimed in to say, personally, I strive to be proactive with problems rather than introducing pests and trying to manage them. I would rather just not have to worry about them at all, quarantine coral dips, or at least try to catch them quickly and eradicate them.
Ooh, this is wait. This is a saltwater context question. May I?
Yes, we will.
May I?
We cannot talk about aquatic ecosystems and avoid saltwater. To do so would be very foolish.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the vast majority of bioactive tanks out there are reef tanks.
Yeah, 100%.
All reef tanks, unless you start with Dryrock, fuck Dryrock, are bioactive aquariums. But I think this idea of pest control in the reef keeping hobby, I think the negative effects far outweigh the positives. That if you're trying, pests in the aquarium hobby are extremely rare. I mean, you have Aptasia, you have Valonia bubble algae, you might have certain species of hair algae. The odds of getting something radical like a bobbit worm or a mantis shrimp or something like that are slim to none. Especially now that they're not importing rock like they used to, you don't get sea monsters in your aquarium. That is extremely, extremely, extremely rare. Pests like Aptasia, bubble algae, and stuff like that, they're going to show up. They're going to come in on a frag plug. They're going to come in. It's going to be microscopic. It's going to be like a spore in the water, if you will. It's gonna get introduced to the tank, whether you like it or not. But using wild caught sources for biodiversity and microfauna, things like copepods, amphipods, live sponge, filter feeding tuna kits, polycate worms, which are really good for aquariums. I know they look kind of creepy, but they're some of the best tritivores you get. Microbrittles, macroalgae, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I can list all the good things of hitchhikers, all the good animals you can bring in. And I can count Aptasia on my hand, Aptasia/Mohanos, bubble algae, and the 1 in a million chance to get a mantis shrimp or something like that. And even most mantis shrimps, most of the Gondactylus species, the little Gibridis and the little mantis shrimp, are actually completely root safe. They might take out a hermit, but who fucking cares? Hermits are restricted to
that one guy got an octopus.
Yeah, and then there's that one guy on Reef Central who just had an octopus show up his tank. That's cool as shit. Who cares if he eats my chromis? I have a fucking octopus in my reef tank. That's dope as shit. So So, and kind of going, the other part of his question too, he's talking about, coral dips and stuff. Coral pests are a different animal. In my opinion, and this is coming from a guy that's dealt with importing coral for 15 years and seen every pest in the book. Pests like acro-eating flatworms, redbugs, zoa-eating flatworms, and Southern California had a huge, I mean, it was the COVID-19 of fucking acro-eating flatworms happened about 7 or 8 years ago. These pests, yes, they came from the wild, and I know where they came from, and they were pinported back to certain shipments of Australian corals from a wholesaler that's not in business anymore. Not because of the flowers, just it was a money thing, but the pandemic of acro-eating flatworms was introduced by people trading corals in each other's aquariums. It did not come from the wild. It started the wild, but the truth is acro-eating flatworms, like a lot of other things, don't make it, in quarantine. If you take a large colony of acros, you put it, and it has flatworms on it, you put it in a big tank with extremely turbulent flow, you introduce halochorus wrasses, you maybe do a couple, very specific dips and stuff, they're going to go away. When people are trading frags tank to tank, and they don't have, these prophylactic, things in place like high flow, pesting animals, they're giving it to each other. We stopped taking in trade-ins because all the trade-ins of acros that were coming in were all covered in pests. But the wild caught stuff was coming in fine. And the wild caught stuff that was kind of questionable, I would hack it up into shreds. I would frag it day one, an acro the size of a dinner plate. I'd put it in very high flow turbulent water with a bunch of halochorus wrasses. And once you open up the acro, it's like a buffet. There's no areas in the coral where the fish can eat, can miss, and they'd be fine in days. So I'm going on a rant. I tend to do that, but most the you say pest, I mean, we'll say hitchhiker, same difference, but the pests are very few and far between compared to the benefits of some of these live animals. You want sponge in your tank, you want tunicates in your tank, you want polychaetes and microbrittle stars. Like, that's good stuff. And having a sterile tank is going to prevent that. And rant.
Very nice.
Yeah, I think that's
freshwater.
Well, I think that's an absolutely great point, and I think even in freshwater, most of the pests you're going to introduce aren't from wild environments. They're from idiotic tanks, right?
Yeah,
And most of your freshwater pests aren't as difficult to deal with. They're not like the worst I've had to do was that I had one Amazon sword that I just kind of tossed out. It's like oops, I lost like $5. I'll live, but I've gotten a lot more beneficial things from plants I've brought into my tank. I've gotten fucking snails, which unfortunately with my tank, any of these hitchhikers that come in live very, very short lives. Because my tank is mostly larger African predators, and they don't really tolerate snails. In fact, I haven't seen an invertebrate in my tank in over a year.
Well, Oscar, you need to get one of those giant apple snails.
Oh, dude, that thing would be a feast. It would not last long.
That'd be pretty cool.
But part of doing an ecosystem, to me personally, is not just introducing bioactive ingredients. It also means the diet of your fish should be as close to a natural diet as you can do. Some people may not, some people are like, give me my fucking pellets. But I very much like to keep the diet of my fish as close to the wild as possible. Not always possible. I've had to use pellets in sad corona times and stuff like that when it's been harder to go to my store. But what do you guys make of that? Do you guys feed your fish more natural or flakes?
Well, I'm the huge advocate of flake and pellet is animal abuse, essentially. No, I just
Frozen's good.
for the amount of food the fish is eating with a flake or pellet food, the nutrient content is so low compared to live or even frozen food.
Absolutely.
And I truly believe that for the vast majority of fish, a primarily frozen food diet is going to be best. Obviously you want to keep it varied. One thing that's a big proponent, or a big argument rather, against frozen food is if you feed your fish exclusively frozen brine, they're gonna get what's the word? It's an iodine deficiency. I can't remember what the goiters. They're gonna get goiters.
Yes, yeah, I've heard of that too.
That is a thing that does happen, but the way you avoid that is vary the diet. Don't give them exclusively brine. I feed probably about 70% brine to my smaller fish because it's a lot cheaper than a lot of other frozen foods. But bloodworms are great too. Mysis are great too. Cyclops are great too. Daphnia. It's all stuff that for a carnivorous or even omnivorous fish should probably be most of their diet. The fish that'll take it, I'll give them leafy greens as well, but not all fish will take that. And then gel food is also really good for stuff. Gel food is not as good in my opinion as a frozen food most of the time, but it is going to allow for some of those nutrients that the fish may or may not be lacking from eating only frozen food. But I also use a vitamin supplement on all my frozen food, which frankly I'm not sure if it is necessary in freshwater. I know it is in salt because there's some nutrients they just can't get from just frozen food for some fish. I don't know the specifics of what fish. But I use like Vitachem. It's one of my favorites, or even Seachem Nourish is a little bit more available. That's good as well. But anyway, my point being is frozen food is going to be way better, way more natural for your fish than any flake or pellet diet.
And for those who don't know, just going earlier, a goiter is a direct result of iodine deficiency, which Andy mentioned, and it's basically when your thyroid enlarges and it causes a whole bunch of problems. It can impair breathing. It can cause... It's just bad for you. Get your iodine. That's in humans too. Make sure you don't have iodine deficiency.
This is
Most people
TCT
do.
health message.
It's very common, especially in pregnant women. So I try to do frozen and live for the most part too. Just make a little game out of it. What's the last thing everyone's fed to their tank?
Frozen scallops, frozen squid, frozen shrimp.
I thawed frozen mysis, frozen bloodworms, frozen brine, and frozen cyclops.
I fed some frozen. I was Daphnia last night, and then I chucked a few blanched cucumbers in for my swordtails.
Grath over here, good man, using Reef Frenzy. That's great shit too. I use a Celcon supplement, which is a highly unsaturated fatty acid supplement. It's supposed to help. There's kind of
yeah, Celcon's great too.
Yeah, Celcon's great. Fish like I have Morse idol, which is a very hard fish to get proper nutrition to. He seems to be responding really well to it. I use it for all my finicky feeders. I believe corals kind of dig it too. The only thing that doesn't really enjoy it is the protein skimmer, so I usually leave my skimmer off for about 8 hours. It kicks back on with a timer after being off for 8 hours. But I have a theory, and it's not proven. It's just like my gut, my aquarium instincts have told me that a lot of like cheap brine shrimp, cheap mysis shrimp. So you have this little shrimp, all right? Inside the little shrimp are his delicious, healthy, nutritious guts, all right? The healthy, nutritious guts. Just hear me out.
Yeah.
The healthy, nutritious guts are what the fish eats, and they get nutrition from it, and they're happy and healthy, and they get colorful and round. But shrimp have shells, and when small mysis shrimp and small brine shrimp are frozen and beat up, and the animals handle in the way it is to create the quantity of frozen food out there, I feel like they get cracked and their guts just fall out, and you're just basically feeding shrimp shells to your fish. It's like all crunch, no protein. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I've heard that many times. And
certain brands like Piscine Mysis, because they use a flash freezing process and there's not much water in there, I feel like they're a little more intact. And that's why I use things like Celcon. That's why I use things like Reef Frenzy or LRS, Lair's Reef Services, which is a fucking phenomenal marine food. If you don't have it, ask your fish store to get it. Support them. They're great guys. Small business, human quality ingredients. You can literally eat their fish food. They do on YouTube. But I find like a lot of the cheap stuff just doesn't have that nutritional sustenance, and there's nothing to go off this except my gut feeling. And my gut feeling with the stuff is usually not far off. But that's why I go to Costco, I buy frozen seafood, I feed my fish, I dice it up, I crush it up, I put silicone on top of it, and that's really what I started feeding my fish. They just seem to do a lot better with just human grade seafood. Shrimp, scallops, mussels, clams, it's silver sides. I feed silver sides, so that I've gotten away from the cheap stuff, at least for my marine animals. My freshwater animals, they can just get fed live guppies. Live guppies get fed cheap ass flake food because they're live guppies, and the cycle of life continues. But that's just my feeling.
I want to chime in with my opinion because I think it does make a difference, the quality of food you're getting as far as frozen food, but I don't think it's as much of a difference as a lot of people think. I think that the difference between piscine energetics mysis and like Hikari mysis, I think the difference is there, but minimal. But as far as going to Costco, or I like to go to the Asian markets because they have super cheap stuff.
Absolutely.
I feed a lot of frozen shrimp as well, like cocktail shrimp or larger, because a lot of my bigger fish will take that, and I think it's just as good for them, and a lot cheaper than fish food.
Oh, it is. It's so much cheaper. Taking the seafood market pill and stop buying frozen
it's
food
like
is
you go to your local fish store and they might have a pound of mysis for what, $10 if it's cheap.
PE mysis is $20 a pound.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to be buying $20 a pound shrimp when you can buy cocktail shrimp for like $4 a pound. You know, that's more expensive than I usually spend on steak. You know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, I just did a big feeding of my aquarium right before the podcast, and I went to my LFS and I got and I went to my grocery store. I made a big feast today. Actually, my LFS is only allowing 5 people in the shop at once right now, so there was actually a huge lineup to get in. They didn't do this before; they just started doing it now. So I'm wondering if there's been a bit of an outbreak there or something. But today, my fish ate frozen chopped grill and shrimp, as well as live crickets. I got them some, and I did 2 endlers. This is the first time my stenopoma have eaten fish, and that made me very happy. I was going to get you guys a video, but it happened very quick, and I was too excited. I was jumping up and down in my room. It was exciting. Next time, I'm going to get about 5 endlers because the stenopoma like them, and you can all watch. But a big part of my diet is that I like to do live insects. That's something I've talked about on the podcast a few times, and we often, we make fun of people who are like, get toys for your fish. They need stimulation and stuff, because that's silly and stupid. But it is reasonable to say, get fish live insects or live food so you can simulate some of that hunting behavior, because that is good for them.
Yeah, I just think it looks nice.
Seeing my Dario like chase down a blackworm as it wiggled around was a great moment for me.
Getting some of that natural hunting behavior going, seeing these fish eat these live foods, but of course you got to do that within reason, because it's not reasonable to feed these fish a terrible feeder fish that comes from across the globe that's been inbred for 10,000 generations. Like, I'm certainly not saying go get yourself a payara and feed him goldfish his whole life.
Yeah. So thiominase. Thiominase is an enzyme contained in some fish that binds to thiamine by vitamin B12. So a lot of people say, if you feed your fish goldfish, they're gonna get thiominase poisoning and it's gonna kill your fish. So there is some truth to this. If you feed exclusively goldfish or other fish, I believe it's mostly just cyprinids that contain thiominase, but there are some other ones, but I don't think most of them are common fish you would use as feeders. If you do exclusively feed thiominase-containing fish to your fish, they are going to get thiominase poisoning and they're going to die. However, the way that you fix this is you don't just exclusively feed goldfish. Feeding goldfish is fine. Feed goldfish to your fish once a week. Feed them other better food, frankly, more often. you're not gonna have an issue. It's overhyped. They're fine as long as you vary the diet.
Yeah.
But some people have translated that to, don't feed goldfish at all because they'll die.
But there are some fish where it's quite a bit harder. If you look at a gulper catfish or a payara, a fish that really, for the most part, needs live foods, it's hard to get some of those larger feeders. It's hard to find good larger feeders, and a lot of these fish end up dying at very young ages because of this. What, Andy, if you were to get, say, a payara, probably one of the animals that does the worst in captivity.
Yeah,
most
they get huge. They need groups, and most people only keep one.
Yeah,
Um,
and they're usually just fed goldfish, which killed them pretty quick.
yeah.
What would you feed something like that?
I would
what's
set
your
up a
large
platy
feed?
breeding tank.
Nice.
I personally have had Pyara off of live. But set up like a platy breeding tank. You know, same kind of deal as with if you're going to keep South American leaf fish. South American leaf fish are one of the few fish that I've never been able to get off of live food. Because my method for getting fish off live food is foolproof. You put a fish in a tank with fish that do eat flake, and then you throw frozen food or flake food in the tank until it eats it. That works almost all the time.
Well, one problem I have with something like platies is, so I haven't done Pyara personally, but I have done gulper cats. And one problem with gulper cats is that when they get larger, they start to outgrow platies and they need larger feeders, and it's harder to find them. So I, back in my old job, I used
So
to
what you
feed
do at this point
alowives
is
and larger silver sides and stuff like that because I got them off of live. But if they're still on live, it's hard to find.
what you do at that point is you go on Craigslist and you find the people getting rid of Mabuna tanks or Oscar tanks.
Yeah, that's literally what I was gonna say. They ended up eating a lot of convict cichlids.
Yeah, but I mean, you also have to keep in mind, gulper cats don't need a lot of food.
No, they definitely don't. That's why alowives and some of those feeder fish worked pretty well.
Yeah. The reason I say platies is because relatively to a lot of other live bearers, they're a lot more prolific, I've found, and they're also larger than like a guppy.
Yeah, I would have done frogs, but they're more of a deep water species, and they don't really eat frogs. It's unfortunate. I mean, I think one of the most, like, statistically, this is gonna sound stupid, but
Oscar,
probably
do not worry about sounding stupid. I had my little god talk about natural aquariums.
probably en masse, the most abused fish in the industry are probably your goldfish and your betas, but percent-wise, as in the percent bought that are abused, I think Pyara is probably at the top because it's probably 99% of them that are given these terrible conditions and die super young.
I've never seen how to make a perfect tank for them. I've never seen that. It's all the beta videos.
Like, Andy, how long do most people keep them for? How long do they stay alive for? Like a year or two?
Yeah, I
When
mean,
in the wild, like 10
people
years?
don't give them big enough tanks. They don't keep them in an adequately sized group. And I mean, because what's the most amount of pyre you've seen in a tank? 2, 3.
Yeah, something like that.
And people feed them goldfish. You know, that's up there with stuff like silver arowana as far as most abused fish.
So Matt asked a question about feeding.
What did Matt say?
So he wants to mix up the diet of his little dolphin fish. The problem is, okay, so right now he only eats blackworms and bloodworms, or maybe earthworms, but he won't eat things like diced shrimp or frozen brine shrimp. So what would you guys do to make the fish accept other kind of food?
There are 3 things that I would try. In order of what I would do personally, which may or may not be it's probably not the best order, just 'cause I'm a lazy idiot. The order I would do is starve the fish, because that fish can go 2 weeks without eating. So give it a week without feeding anything other than brine until it takes it. That'd be what I do first. Next, I would try putting fish in there that will eat them. So throw in, like, I don't know, anything, because you can really keep anything big enough to not get eaten with them mormarid, especially near 75. Throw in anything that'll eat brine shrimp. Let that fish watch the other fish eating brine shrimp, and that'll probably get it to eat it. The other thing you could do is soak it in garlic. That often will help fish eat. Like I forget what brand makes garlic guard.
We talked about this before, didn't we?
Wait, isn't garlic guard a sea chem?
I think it is CChem. That's what I was thinking. Garlic guard. Some people, for whatever reason, buy it as a medication. It won't do anything.
It does not cure ick.
It does not cure ick, but what it does do is you can soak food in it and it'll make fish more likely to eat because it's stinky.
Stinky.
Sometimes again, I'm not a professional. Andy's definitely more experienced in this than me, but some things I'll do. If I'm trying to go from something like bloodworms to what was he saying? Was he saying some sort of frozen shrimp or something like that?
Yeah, you just
What
try a varied
I'll do
diet.
is I'll take your bloodworm cube, I'll cut it in half, and I'll put it in at the same time as a piece of shrimp or something and try to put them together and hope that maybe he gets the bloodworms with a bit of the shrimp or something. See if I can get him on. My other strategy, this is probably the one I use the most, is I reach in the tank and I open his little mouth and I just shove.
Please don't do this.
Disclaimer: don't do that.
You could, but it'd probably
That
do
was a
more
joke.
harm than
That
good.
was a joke.
You'd probably
But-
just be really confused.
Little dolphin mormorids looking up like, what the fuck?
why is the feeding man holding me?
Yeah, and for those that don't know, our listener asked that question is Matt. Matt's great dude, stand-up guy. He has a dolphin mormorid, an amazing fish.
They have
Highly
little snouts that horse thinks are funny.
Yeah, I'm with you that sometimes mormorids, I find them harder to get eating larger shrimp and stuff. I'm not the scientist on this, but sometimes I find they get used to eating these smaller worms like bloodworms, and then they don't go for things that are slightly bigger, like pieces of shrimp or not. Andy may know more about that, but that's but I have had problems like that before, mostly with like Peter's elephant nose and stuff like that.
I don't know science behind it, but I found that to be the case as well, at least anecdotally.
Yeah. Yeah, but amazing fish.
yeah.
I love mormorids. I highly recommend them.
They're cool. They got little snouts.
Yeah, that's most of my tanks. I like to do African river species. I of course I don't follow biotopes closely because that's just lame. But I like to do a lot of African river fish because I find those are the ones that interest me the most, and I like to do a little ecosystem with them. So I like if you gave me a freshwater tank and say put whatever you want in it, it'll always be some form of bichir, mormorids, African osteoglossiforms, and never cichlids because cichlids are the worst fish on earth.
I will kill you.
Oscar, I would just want to really quickly.
If you want to see my cool fish,
No.
you have to get through all the tanks full of brown cichlids.
And Serp, who mentioned ropefish when I was talking about my favorite African species, I just include ropefish when I say bichirs. It's
Brennan, what were you gonna say?
both cladesta.
I just wanted to throw in really quickly. Oscar mentioned biotopes, and yeah, when we say naturalistic aquariums or building ecosystems, that doesn't mean you need to use plants from like specifically one river in the world. Okay, like that. I don't think like biotopes are cool and all, but like keep the fish and the plants you want to keep. Just that doesn't necessarily mean you're not simulating nature. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
I think biotopes can be great, and there's a lot of amazing, cool biotopes. One of our listeners right now, Myrtle from the Aquarium guys, he was telling me that he sets up a few different tanks, and he chooses one region for each one. And whenever he goes to the fish store and sees something interesting from that region, he adds it.
So
I think
cool.
that's really cool, and it's a fun way to do things. But I don't like that. Like, I don't want people to feel limited. Like, well, I started this this Congo River biotope. Now I have to make sure I get plants from that region because it's like, don't stress yourself about this because if you go into any of those regions, you're probably not going to find any of those things anyway together.
I mean, me personally, I collect most of my plants from ponds outside. So really, I guess all my tanks should just be like tiny little like fish and aquatic isopods. But they're getting close to that. But
Yeah, I think you definitely don't want to fall into these rules that are maybe not necessarily they're more just things to stress yourself out about.
Yeah,
like
I don't want people to stress out about, oh God, I listened to the TCT podcast and now I'm stressed because my fish are from different regions of South America. Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big, not huge fan of Biotope guy myself, just personally because I don't want to limit myself with my tanks. However, one benefit of biotopes, or at least not mixing continents or general like area or like kind of water in the area per se, is fish, at least in the retail setting, seem to be get sick less often. Like if I were to put fish from Asia and fish from South America together, at least in the retail setting, they seem to be less healthy.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, definitely with you on that. One thing that I just like to say though is go to the Congo River, go to any of these rivers or lakes that you're trying to emulate. The fish you're getting are never together. You're never going to find any square where you're going to find all these fish and plants together. It's just not representative of these locations, right?
Yeah, the true biotope is just probably some sand and a bunch of quarries.
True biotope's just a bunch of plants and vertebrates and then maybe one fish. But
Yeah. What's kind of funny is that I've talked about this before, and I'm not going to talk about it much quickly, not very much, but it's funny because I generally dislike like aquascaping because I feel it favors the tank over the fish, and I don't think that's right. But whenever I see like those biotope aquascapes, I quite like them because they actually favor they're made to be like the environment the fish lives in, so they end up actually having more of like a jungle aesthetic to them. They have a lot of wood, they have a lot of hiding places, so those actually look quite nice. So I just want to chime in really quick and say, guys, I don't hate all aquascapes, I just hate people who make moss trees.
that's fair. I do think that there are some biotopes you don't want to mix with other species. For example, if you're ever doing like a cave biotope, you probably don't want to put a bunch of site predators in there.
Or say Tanganyikans with any other fish.
Yes. And you don't want to do... Another reason not to do Tanganyikans with other fish is simply because Tanganyikans are the best cichlids and no other cichlids are cool.
Thanks, Oscar.
This is not true.
Guys,
I would like the record to show that he is wrong.
all right. So what if we did a
That looks great.
saltwater tank with Dryrock? You carve that Dryrock into a tree, and then you put like
Kato on it to make it a
on
moss
and
tree.
made a moss tree Dryrock saltwater.
I mean, it would be absolutely hilarious, but I would probably gouge my eyes out.
Someone would do that somewhere, and I would just like feel it. Like I'd just have a chill go down my spine. Like
I can smell your tank from here.
Some Doctor Sleep shit. Like I'm just psychically connected, and I just feel it across. And I'm like somewhere in Kansas, someone did the unspeakable. I just go find it and kill
We
them.
should have a scene in Aquarium Jackass where we go around to people's houses and we ask if they have fish tanks, and then we go inspect it, and if it's bad, Funk smashes the tank with a hammer. That would be a fun way to get arrested, I think.
I think
You have to acclimate moss balls to salt water.
So Funk, did you say you took all the tannins out of your Blackwater? It still looks quite nice.
Yeah, I accidentally unblacked it. Well, the problem with the loquat leaves, which you can see, they're a little fussy about sinking. And I put loquat leaves and seed pods in my macroalgae refugium. Because why not? So we have some anonymous podcast listeners that are saying they want to have complete control over their aquariums, and I'm fucking putting leaves in my saltwater tank to see what would happen. I feel like there's two different kinds of aquarists. Not saying one is right and one is wrong, but there's just two kinds of people out there in the world.
Whenever my leaves float, I just put a rock on top.
Yeah, they'll sink in time. And I don't also, just to go back to the way I treat these leaves, is I just soak them in a bucket in the sun until they sink. Because what I post in that picture above drives me crazy is when they float. But I was like, oh shit, my tank isn't Blackwater anymore. Quick, tannins. But usually when I soaked a bucket of leaves, like the water's like coffee colored, and this has been out there for 3 days. It's like barely tinted, so I just don't think these are good leaves.
I actually personally, this is a little aside here, but I actually personally like occasionally my Blackwater, it'll lose its tannins, and I kind of like that look for a few days, and then I add some tea in there, and it goes back to look, and it's kind of just having something that's not always the same is kind of nice.
Yeah,
it still looks really nice without tannins, and it's kind of nice to see my fish sometimes.
Yeah, no, and I kind of dig it, like I'm not looking at them like, oh, this is terrible, but it actually looks so different. That's kind of where I'm at.
Should we close up by talking about tannins and Blackwater real quick, and then
let's get into it.
I mean, I don't know what there is to say about Blackwater that hasn't been said, but
I don't think we've really talked about it much. So
have we not talked? Maybe I've just listened to other podcasts like the Aquarium Guys podcast. Please check out their
podcast.
Discord.
Shout out
to Rob's and the Aquarium Guys podcast. Go check it out.
They were on the Storytime episode. That was episode 8.
Yeah, they were on the Storytime episode. They're good guys. I think Rob's is an alcoholic, but aside from that,
that makes them fit in with us a little bit better.
Actually, makes them fit in with us pretty well because we're all
everyone at TCT is an alcoholic.
It's not a joke. It's true.
It's actually pretty awful. It's almost ruined my marriage and my son. But
your son's
it's a crippling disorder, man. It's cost me everything in my life. I just sit at home alone. Wife left me.
None of this is true.
Fish crying, drinking Bacardi 151, and then watching my Moorish idol eat Salcon-enriched scallops.
And then topping off your tank with vodka. I can't remember what that does.
Also defunct Alcoholics Anonymous intervention.
Vodka is a source of ethanol, and it basically the most layman's way of describing probiotic systems is you basically create unnaturally large amounts of bacteria plankton in your water system. You can do that with a vodka glucose vinegar method. There's biopellets, there's zeolite, there's a billion ways to do it, but it basically makes your nitrates completely undetectable. Phosphates will usually fall with it. Still might need a little bit of maintenance, but generally not. It's pretty dialed in, but it's like a pretty hardcore way to get immaculately clean water.
All right, well, there you go. We were laughing about it the other day, so I couldn't remember.
I unironically vodka dosed in high school. Like I had vodka and I drank vodka, but I also had a little thing of vodka under my tank. My dad bought me a pint of cheap vodka and was like, "Here you go, son."
I'll throw in this quick little joke about vodka dosing. We were talking about treating ick with garlic as a joke, and then someone brought up vodka dosing, and then I accidentally searched treating ick with vodka, and then I found an actual forum post where a guy was treating ick with vodka. It did not work.
Vodka dosing is actually a very valid system. The problem with vodka dosing is because you create these very, very unnaturally large populations of bacterial plankton. Yeah. You have to keep them fed. So you actually, in a way, you turn your aquarium into an alcoholic because it needs the vodka to survive. Otherwise, you can create nasty bacteria die-offs. So be careful. The Funkotope right there. So be careful because you can actually legitimately fuck up your shit. It's also really easy to overdose. Zeovit, of all the ways of doing it, Zeovit was probably my favorite because it was so technical and you could really dial it in. But Zeovit is another level of reef keeping most people do not want to commit to, or any zeolite method. Don't try to do it yourself unless you really know your shit. But we were talking about something before I went and started talking about vodka dosing. Oh, Blackwater.
Yeah, Blackwaters.
So Blackwater tanks. It's the concept of basically simulating natural riverbeds, creek beds like you find in the jungle. You have a river or creek in the jungle. Leaves fall in, they decompose. Wood falls in, decomposes, and you basically get this musty, yellow, stinky water with a bunch of decomposing shit in it. Usually get pretty acidic water. It gets this kind of haziness, yellow tint to it that looks like tea. It's fucking great.
It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. I didn't really think this out, but basically, the reason I like it, first off, I just like the tea aesthetic. There's something about it. It reminds me of the fall.
Yeah,
it just has this auburn brown color to it. I just find them quite comfy. I don't think I could ever keep a freshwater tank that was not Blackwater in some capacity. But it has a lot of other benefits too. It seems to alter the water chemistry. That it makes a environment with a lot of fish that are very hard. Have a reputation for being hard to keep. Wild-caught angels, discus, funky apistogrammas. Cardinal tetras, fish that just are sensitive, seem to kick ass in this environment. Their colors are brighter, they're more active, just because it's like they find the wild. And then it also, because you have this thin veneer of decomposing leaves everywhere, it seems to create a very good area for microfauna. So again, we went on probably an hour-long tangent, not talking about ecosystems and bioactive tanks, but it all circles back. Blackwater is a great way to feed microfauna in aquariums, and I love it.
One really quick aside: if you're listening to the podcast, join the community tank Discord and hop in the cast during the podcast, because Myrtle from the Aquarium guys is making memes and they're really fucking good.
Yeah, you can't see those memes because this is an audio recording.
We have a Discord. We have a Discord.
We do.
Oh, sick. Yeah, nice. I had no idea.
One of the great things, Funk, actually, the perfect thing about Blackwaters for housing microfauna is that you got the floaters on top with all the microfauna, and you've got a leaf litter on the bottom with all the microfauna hiding in there. So it's like you got the top and the bottom, and then, all your fish in between. It's great. I love it.
And
it's natural.
A lot of these really inquisitive, more cryptic species do so well in Blackwater. Mormorids, your gymnotus, all your knife fish, they do so well in Blackwater.
Unless you're Camden. Shout out to Camden.
We love you, Camden. I don't know how you managed to have all of your fish breed immediately and then die.
Puts the hatchet fish in the tank.
It's like, is that like a natural behavior, like a bailout? Like fish just start reproducing really, really fast because they think they're gonna die. Like oh shit, I have to prolong my lineage quick. And really
the second he put the hatchet fish in the tank, they spawn and then everyone dies.
Well, that's what sea anemones do. Like stressed out sea anemones, they start splitting like fucking crazy.
That is the most the most spectacular thing. Like imagine you get some hatchet fish, you put them in their tank, they all jump out of the tank, and then they all spawn, and then all the babies die.
They just have an orgy and drop dead.
My hatchet fish just killed each other.
Wow. My hatchet fish just killed each other.
No, actually, Andy brought me some hatchet fish. He thought they had ick. Then his boss informed him, no, hatchet fish just bite each other and leave little sores that people think are ick. And then all my hatchet fish ripped each other's fins up, and then they all died and became mystery snail food.
Fun fact. It has been over a year since my last fish death.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I just had a fish die 2 days ago. My butterfly fish.
My betta just died.
So I was thinking. Oh,
wait! I got one more thing to say about Blackwater tanks. You have not truly enjoyed aquariums until you watched Corey Doris swim around in decomposing leaf litter, because it's fucking adorable. They take the little whiskers and go like
that is my favorite. So happy. I was literally just staring at like a shoal of like 6 last night. They're all like spinning around together and like going through the leaves, and it's just they're so cute. Corys are the best normie fish. There was one more thing I'd like to say. Oh yeah, by the way, guys, if you're ever low on plants, just go to the ditch and grab some plants. They're cool. I'm making a video on it soon. Check that out whenever it happens.
Check out Spiritual Fish Lads podcast. If you have a donation for us, that's great, but send it to Ohio Fish Rescue before us. Because they could use it more. I'll probably just spend it on alcohol.
Yeah. We also have t-shirts. They're cool. First purchase, all the money is going to go to Funk's child. The only purchase we have had is actually not on the TCT store. It was on the separate one I made for my own art. So sorry, that is not for Funk.
Sorry guys, I missed anything. I just had to go kill a spider for my wife.
Oh.
She literally was like, Mark, come here. She's like whispering through the door because she knows my camera's on. She doesn't want to show everyone how pregnant she is. And she's like, I need you to come here. I thought it was like, oh shit, her water broke. And she's like, you need to kill the spider.
What kind of spider? Was it a jumping spider?
It's a dead spider now. It's fucking dead.
Funk, how dedicated are you to this podcast? If her water broke and you're driving her to the hospital, would you continue doing it in the car ride?
She can fucking wait till we're done.
I'm leaving that in.
No, it'd actually be pretty dramatic. I'd be like, shit guys, Eagles landed, code red, and I just take off. It'd be all dramatic, or I just disappear, and you'd be like, "Where's Funk?" And you'd be like, "Oh, he's fine."
I'm gonna have to record. I'm gonna have to record every VC this week, just hoping that I'll catch the moment.
I don't know the process, man. I don't know much. I've never had a kid. I don't know about wives in labor. I've heard that like you know, people have their kids in cars, and I've heard that some people are in labor for 48 hours, and I've heard, like, you know, I think, you know, you're just going to go into it, and what's going to happen is going to happen. I mean, I feel like we're pretty prepared with the dry goods. We have a pretty sweet oceanic-themed nursery, of course. We got sharks and whale posters everywhere, and a collection of sea animals sent by some of the members of TCT. But, like, in the end of the day, like, my wife asked me, she's like, have you been, like, studying and reading? And I was like, well, I mean, I've read some basic stuff and some books, and I watched this really cheesy video, but I'm not going to learn it until I actually experience it. Like, I can read shit all day, but I'm not going to, you know, absorb it. But if I, like, learn how to, you know, like, have a crying kid, I'm going to put that kid to fucking sleep. And then I'll be good at it.
I think, having a kid is a lot like having an aquarium. Just like we said earlier, if it's not fun, it's not worth doing. Make sure the kid is doing.
You know, also, Funk makes a great point. You know, you're going to learn more from actually having a tank than watching shitty YouTube videos. You're going to learn more from having a kid by actually having a kid and not reading a book.
Yeah, and I see some, like, people out there that have, like, and so, I think we were talking about this earlier. I think we talked about some podcasts too. I see people out there with, like, 6 kids, 4 dogs. They're like a fucking electrical engineer, and they can't even keep a fucking beta alive. I'm over here keeping, like, multiple tanks of exotic sea creatures and freshwater creatures alive with little to no effort. I mean, it's a fucking kid. How hard could it be? You know, wipe its diapers and stop it from crying, and, you know,
I'm gonna quote this moment, and we'll see how Funk's doing in a few weeks.
Yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out. I mean, either the kid's gonna drown in an aquarium, or he's gonna rule the world. I mean, there's no in between.
Funk, while he's small, you should unironically baptize him in your aquarium.
I will live stream that.
Live
I will take some hootie water, and I will, like, put an upside down cross on his forehead.
I'll drink a gallon of murky Blackwater if you do that.
Baptize him in Blackwater. I don't know.
I meant I will drink a gallon of my murky Blackwater if you actually live stream yourself doing that.
Okay, deal.
Baptize him in salt.
God, I'm so excited.
Salt water, and slowly mix Acropora into his baby food. Turn him into the best saltwater aquarium.
It's pronounced Acropora.
It's pronounced Acropora. I knew you were gonna say it. The second I said it, I'm like, oh shit. It's gonna be. He's gonna say it. So if no one in our
there's no questions, so bye.
Podcast has anything to say, then yeah, I guess we can end it here, and then we can move everyone into the voice chat above, and we can have a talk.
So I just want to go on the record and say, fuck our fans for not asking questions. Fuck you all.
Yeah, so this is the last episode of the podcast now.
Yeah, don't buy our merch.
I'm disappointed in all of you.
And fuck you, Snail, especially you. You're the worst.